But how about all those people that were not able to come to see me or come to speak to me or reach out to their elected official? That person in front of me is really speaking for thousands.
Welcome to Boundless B, the Hemophilia B podcast, the podcast standing with you from a family like yours, presented by the Coalition for Hemophilia B and in partnership with Balancing Life's Issues. I'm your host, Kai. Today, we're sitting down with someone who has shown up for our community again and again, not just when the cameras are on, not just during Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month, but on quiet days too. New York State Senator Joseph P. Addabbo Jr. has represented the 15th Senatorial District in Queens since 2008. Communities like Richmond Hill, Forest Hills, Ozone Park, Woodhaven, and Middle Village. And in Albany, he has been one of the most consistent allies the bleeding disorder community has had. He has also co-sponsored legislation taking on insurance roadblocks our families know all too well, the ones that turn a doctor's recommendation into a months-long waiting game. He has stood shoulder to shoulder with advocates from New York State Bleeding Disorders Coalition when they've come to Albany to tell their stories. And year after year, he has helped make sure New York officially recognizes March as Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. What sets him apart, though, is how he listens. He hosts community coffee meetings called Job with Joe, where anyone can sit down face-to-face with the senator, no barriers, no gatekeepers, just a conversation over coffee. Our community has felt that openness firsthand. The partnership between us runs deep, and it runs both ways. In October 2025, we presented him with our Legislative Leadership Award for his advocacy on behalf of individuals with bleeding and rare disorders. 2 months later, he returned the gesture by honoring the coalition with an official New York State proclamation recognizing our 35th anniversary, presented personally to our CEO, Kim Phelan. That's what a real partnership between a public servant and a community looks like: mutual, genuine, and sustained. He also carries on a remarkable legacy of public service. His father served 13 terms in the United States House of Representatives representing Queens. Senator, welcome back into the family. We're so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Kai. I appreciate the opportunity.
Can you share a little bit about how you first became connected to the bleeding disorders community and what impact that experience had on you as a legislator?
It actually was a meeting, and one that I will never, ever forget. I was up in Albany, and it was on my calendar, and that's when I met Elizabeth Cedeno and her 2 sons. And she's a constituent, and now she's a friend. And, she educated me, Kai. She basically mentioned what the bleeding disorders are all about, how her 2 sons are dealing with this issue, and how, as a family, they are dealing with this issue. And she truly opened up my eyes to the issue of the bleeding disorder awareness, what we need to do legislatively, even budgetarily and funding. And I think every year since, because this was a while ago, and then every year since, she's come up to Albany to advocate. But that's what it is for a constituent to come up to their elected official and educate us and put something on our radar so serious. I will always remember that meeting. I'll always be thankful.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, because I know advocacy can be a very scary word for families. Going to the Capitol and, meeting with folks like yourselves can be intimidating. So, in that moment, I guess, can you talk to us a little more about what that's like for you personally and on an emotional level to hear these stories, and any advice for families out there who are maybe hesitant to maybe taking that step to come tell their story?
I really hope that individuals aren't hesitant, because we really need to hear these heartfelt stories. I know it's tough. I understand the perspective of a parent telling about a child's situation, or even the individual themselves dealing with the disorder. But they have to tell the story, because that brings the emotion behind it. That brings us the ammunition we need as legislators to move forward. When we were doing paid family leave in New York State, to hear the heart-wrenching stories about how they watch out for their dying mother or father, and how they had to take time from work. These were heart-wrenching stories, but they resonated so much that today we have paid family leave in New York State. I think it's those stories that are so hard to tell but need to be told that really makes a difference in effectuating positive change, especially with bleeding disorders.
Thank you for that answer. So I guess for listeners who aren't really familiar with your district, can you paint a picture about what it's like representing that part of Queens?
Sure. Senate District 15, which I've represented for 17 years in the Senate. Basically, it is a working class district. It's a quite diverse district, as I do live in Queens, and it is a part of Queens, which is the most diverse borough in the world. And so, dealing with each community, we have roughly 8 to 12 so major communities in the district. And the idea here is they're all unique. So the issues of, in Howard Beach and Woodhaven and Ozone Park and Middle Village and Glendale and Nesbeth and Key, Regal Park and Forest Hills and Richmond Hill and South Richmond Hill and South Ozone Park,
Hmm.
all those, they're all unique. And so that's why I love my district so much. There are roughly 320,000 people. And we try to, again, make sure that we represent all.
Let's talk about kind of your legacy, right? So you came from a family of politicians, or was it just your dad? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was just my dad. So I would think my dad and my mom had three children. I have an older brother and an older sister, and both of them were around before my dad got into politics. So they saw my dad around as a local lawyer in the neighborhood, and then, of course, getting elected to the Congress in 1960 and going forward. But I was the only child born while my father was in office. So the only father I knew was that of a public servant. And Kai, I got to tell you, he loved what he did. He loved helping people. He loved the fact that he was given an opportunity to every day try and help someone. And I grew up watching him battle cancer toward the later part of his career, but not retire, not resign, not do anything, but continue to work. And unfortunately, he passed away in Washington at an event, when the cancer finally got him. And so I learned so much about my father, a lot after he passed, actually. But the things that he taught me along the way, Kai, is things that I take with me even today. The number one focus that any elected official has, the number one focus, help others. That's it. That's our job. One job, major job, help others. That's your focus. And, whether it be legislatively or anything else, bottom line is to help others. And also, he told me that never look at a problem through our eyes, because we may see a situation as insignificant or not important. But when you look at a problem through the constituents' eyes as they come to you for help, you see the magnitude to them, how serious an issue could be. And so whether it be a bleeding disorder or whether it be the Mr. Softee ice cream truck music is too loud and it's driving a constituent crazy. And that is a true story. I took that ice cream truck story, music constituent story very seriously, because that's what I was taught. You deal with these things and these issues very seriously. So a lot of what he taught me well over 35 years ago, 40 years ago, actually, is still with me today. It's the basis of what I do, listening to people, then leading. Be a good listener and then figure out how you're going to lead. I think that's important. So watching him through his healthy years and through his rough years, certainly a learning experience. I had a great teacher and a great father.
Yeah, and again, it just reminds me of that importance of telling stories, right? Because you don't have the information, the emotional impact that you need as a senator, as a representative, to then go take action, right? Otherwise, maybe it's just on a list of phone calls you got that day or emails, or I don't know if there's a complaint box that you guys have to sort through. But again, for those listening, your story is really important, and I think, especially now that we're talking about how you got into this, I've had the opportunity to meet so many incredible young people at the symposiums, at the Beats program in Nashville, online, all across the country. I'm always so impressed at how they want to advocate at their age. And whether it's I'm the sibling of somebody who has it or I have it myself, I want to advocate. I want to tell my story. So for those maybe segment of those young people I've met, what's the best thing that they can do to stay on this track and maybe someday represent a neighborhood like Queens someday?
Exactly. It's definitely to speak out. Advocacy is great, but with that advocacy has to come some confidence that because of your advocacy, some positive effect is going to be done. If somebody doesn't have the confidence that what they're saying is not going to be heard or what they're saying is not going to be adhered to or listened to or acted upon, they'll stop. They'll stop advocating. And we never want people to stop advocating. We may not agree with everyone 100%. That's okay. We're human. We could agree or we could disagree professionally or cordially. But the bottom line is we encourage, especially young residents, to speak out. Let your voice be heard. Contact your elected officials. Contact the local media, social media. Be positive about what you're advocating for. I really do gravitate toward positive messaging when let's do something to help others or let's do something to address an issue in a positive way. I really gravitate toward that. And so I tell even my younger, elementary school students who feel that, or even a high school student who feels that the elected officials are way up here and they're way down there and we're not going to be heard. That's not true. You do have some elected officials who will hear a person, even if they're far from the age of voting, and they can't
Hmm.
vote for you yet, but they have ideas and they have passion about a certain issue. We truly encourage everyone from every kind of background, advocate, speak out, be heard, make sure you get on someone's radar, because that's the way we effectuate positive change in New York.
Yeah, and I would say, just because you brought up the voting age piece, like, I guess imagine a 16-year-old coming to your office to tell you that their 8-year-old sister or brother or sibling is having trouble getting access to medication, and it's life threatening. Like, just imagine the emotional impact of a young person, coming into your office to do that.
Exactly. I learned very early on when I was running for city council that we shouldn't, back in 2001, 2002, I got installed, but we learned back then, let's talk to everyone. Let's talk to younger residents. And because younger residents spoke out back then during my campaign for city council, we built a skateboard park, first one in Queens, down in Rockaway. And it was designed by younger residents, because when the Parks Department gave me the plans for the original park that they, the adults in the room, drew up, it wasn't designed correctly.
Yeah,
And
none
the
of them
younger
skate.
residents, right. And the younger residents like, we would never use that the way it's designed. The bowl's in the wrong spot, the pipe's in the wrong spot. And I said, wait, you're 11, 12 years old, 13 maybe, and you could design a better park. And they go, yeah. And they did. The Parks Department, I got put them together with the younger residents. And the ultimate final product, a skateboard park that was immensely popular down in Rockaway. It was the first skateboard park in Queens, but it was designed by younger residents who spoke out, saving the city $500,000 because it was designed properly. That's the power of a voice, no matter how old or young. That's the power of a voice, Kai.
That's amazing. And yeah, thank you for that story. That's awesome. So let's kind of shift over to kind of some of the legislation that you've directly been involved with the coalition. You co-sponsored legislation addressing step therapy and prior authorization, two issues our family live with every single day. For listeners who haven't heard those terms before, can you walk us through what those bills were and what was the intent on getting those passed?
No one should ever think that the elected officials know everything about everything. We don't. And so somebody came to, I believe it was then Senator Neil Breslin, who talked to him about step therapy. And we had a bill, and it passed and became law in 2024. And it was about how to curtail step therapy, how it's delaying access to treatment that actually does help those dealing with bleeding disorders, hemophilia, and others. And so the idea here was step therapy needs to be put aside when we have maybe a prescription drug or some treatment that does actually work and help. We don't have to wait to the fail first kind of approach. So that bill that again became law in 2024, which I was a co-sponsor and proudly proud to do that. It was to address an issue that was definitely brought forward by an individual suffering or dealing with step therapy. Now that we've passed it in 2024 and it became law, now we hopefully have the data to show that it's working. And if it's not working, Kai, we need to change it. Everybody should understand when we pass legislation and it becomes law, we don't do the victory lap and go, oh, we're done. My bill became law and we're done. No, actually, another segment of our job starts, and that's the monitoring part. So our bill becomes law. Now let's see if the state implements it correctly. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, we need to amend it or we need to adjust it somehow. And I'm looking forward to getting some data on that step therapy legislation to see if it is being implemented correctly.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear that piece of it. It's something I hadn't thought of. And again, going back to the idea of stories and the power of story, that took a story for that to get put into action.
Yes, no question. And, again, the more people who complain about step therapy or lack of access to some prescription drug with a treatment that works, that's what we need to hear. And that's what gets us motivated to do something legislatively. Me personally, I look at alternatives because legislatively, Kai, is not always the best way to deal with something. It's a cumbersome process. It's a complex process. Passing committees on both the Assembly and the Senate, going to the floor of the Senate and the Assembly, passing both. And then it goes to the governor, and the governor has until the end of the year to sign it. It's a daunting task. It takes a while. I sort of look at, well, let's do the legislation, certainly, but is there an administrative thing that maybe the governor could do or the mayor of New York City or somebody else could do administratively to a change? That's more immediate. Let's do that. Or is it a budgetary item that we could do, fund something, So legislatively is one way of addressing an issue, certainly, but let's look at alternatives that are more efficient, more timely, and still address the issue and resolve it.
Yeah, and that's really encouraging to hear because often you just think, oh, it has to get passed, like it's just but it sounds like there are perhaps fast tracks, or your ability to work the system in the benefit of a community is sounds like it can be promising. You've helped make sure that March is officially recognized as Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. It's a great gesture. It's like obviously welcome. What does that really do on your level in terms of spreading the word about bleeding disorders?
I think first, I am always of the opinion that actions speak louder than words. So I can say, yes, I stand by those individuals suffering with bleeding disorders and hemophilia, but to show in an act of a resolution, introducing it, drafting it, introducing it, I think that's important, the act itself, right? So we got the resolution, it's introduced. Now March is the awareness month. But what a resolution does, if you play it right, if you work it right, is it raises awareness. It causes, people to focus on an issue, and then you tie the resolution to a certain piece of legislation or certain funding aspect that program needs to be funded. So we use the resolutions to actually effectuate, again, positive change in addressing a situation. And that's what we've done with the Reso, because many, many times we introduce a Reso, and for instance, with March being Bleeding Disorder Awareness Month, many of my colleagues, many senators did not know what is that. And maybe none of their constituents came forward. But the idea here is the resolution, again, educated them about the issue. Well, what can we do? Well, there's a couple of pieces of legislation. Why don't you co-sponsor? Hey, there's maybe a funding matter. Can you help me advocate for it? So the idea here is a resolution has many aspects in which to work it or use it to, again, not only raise awareness, but again, effectuate positive change.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of I think there's a marketing term or direction you take is like 7 touch points before a sale, or it's something like that. And to me, it kind of feels like that. So like you're a senator in the Senate and maybe you don't know much about it, but hey, we just passed this resolution for Awareness Month. And oh yeah, I know Senator Joe, like yeah, he's talked about this before. And then, next thing you know, someone has come in contact with this idea, in this case, bleeding disorders. And maybe when they finally hear that story, there's a lot more momentum kind of behind action. So
No
that's really good to
question,
hear.
and that brings us back to our earlier point where we want people to speak out. So, and I really do encourage our listeners to speak out to their state senator, state assembly member, because when they do, maybe the senator or assembly member that they speak to says, "Wow, I remember that resolution," right? And they start to connect the dots. But that's why it's so important for people to speak out as we make legislators aware of the situation and the issue of a bleeding disorder and what we need to do to address it. Maybe again, if they hear a story from a constituent, you know, it would resonate even more. And that's why I encourage people to speak out.
That's amazing. So I think just as we start to wrap up this conversation, 'cause I'm sure you have a busy rest of your day, and we really do appreciate your
This
time.
could be the highlight. I gotta tell you, Kai, this could be
All
the
right,
highlight. I know
well,
it's a Friday. I know it's a Friday. This could be a highlight. I'm telling you.
I got a good one for the end. You just hold on there.
Okay.
So hemophilia B roughly affects 7,000 people across the country, and many other rare diseases reach even fewer numbers. So when you're in Albany, how do you make a case for a community with such small numbers that have such significant needs, especially like financially?
Great question. I can only speak for myself the way I work. But again, what my dad taught me: look at the issue through the other person's eyes, and it takes on a different relevance. It really does. It takes on a seriousness that they see that I don't. But they're going to tell me how it should be taken up seriously. They're going to tell me how important it is to them. And then what I see is when somebody comes to me, they're there for that moment because they chose to do it and they were able to do it. But how about all those people that were not able to come to see me or come to speak to me or reach out to their elected official? That person in front of me is really speaking for thousands. And you mentioned the numbers with hemophilia. It's not only the person who is dealing with the hemophilia themselves, it's their families. So that number that you mentioned, multiply that by 3 or 4, because it's their family members who also are suffering and their friends who are also in this fight. So
Mhm.
while the person, and we know the numbers, 1 in 100, and we know the numbers that, bleeding disorders, hemophilia A, B, we all know the numbers. But the bottom line is, I don't see it as a singular person going through a situation. It's them. That's our main focus, but it's also their families and it's then their friends. And so that number grows throughout the state. So I see it that's why I see it as such a serious issue. We deal with it as we best we can.
Yeah, and I think again you're speaking to so much story, which again comes back to what the point of this conversation is, to get our families out there and advocating and telling their stories, because there might be 100. I'm just throwing a number out there, 100 bills on the we got to get through this
Right.
session, and that story attached to something is what's going to break through what I assume to be a logistical, maybe nightmare is harsh, but hurdles that are required on kind of like that level at the Senate. So the coalition presented you with our Legislative Leadership Award. 2 months later, you turned around the favor with the proclamation on our 35th anniversary. So what did it mean to you to receive that award?
That was amazing, unexpected. I'm doing my job, right? I'm trying to help a constituent. I'm trying to do things for others throughout the state. I'm doing my job, and to be acknowledged and recognized was truly appreciated. It sits very prominently in my Albany office. I talk about it often to those who visit, but I share it. I can never and will never take credit for anything singularly. It's not me. I have a team up in Albany that worked for me. I have a team down in the district that worked for me, and they help me help others. But then it's those that, like Elizabeth Cedeno and like others and Kim Phelan, who come and they basically educate me, and we work together. It's a partnership. So it can never be one singular elected official that gets anything done, ever, in my opinion. It's a teamwork. It's a patchwork of people getting together. It's puzzles, pieces of the puzzle put together. And when all those pieces fit, Kai, a great picture of success, of like a real positive outcome. That's the way I see it. And I truly appreciate the accolades. I truly appreciate the awards and the recognition. It's truly and forever appreciated. But please understand, it can never be just me. It definitely is teamwork, whether it be with this issue of bleeding disorders or other issues.
Well said, and thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to start to wrap up here. So Java with Joe, I'm in the coffee shop. I'm across from you at a counter. What is maybe the most profound moment you've had? And then maybe what was maybe one of the funniest moment you've had during the Java with Joe session?
I love my Java with Joe's. It's a concept I came up with because I think people can't see their state center, especially up in Albany, or basically Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So we do Java with Joe's on a Saturday or Sunday in the morning. I love my Dunkin' Donuts. I love my Starbucks, but I do these at privately owned businesses because we want to support the small business. So all these cafes and coffee places and bakeries I go to are privately owned. And just recently, I honored one of them, woman of distinction. I honored the owner of one, a single mom who's struggling but keeps this bakery open in Ozone Park. Sweet Little Sweets, great place. And the idea here is that's where we go to do Java with Joe's. And it's anything or anyone that walks through the door. And they have some serious issues. Some are very serious. They have to do with life and death situations. They have to do maybe something on their block. And I take it very seriously. And I love it because it gives me an opportunity to go back and forth and go one-on-one. Sometimes people come in and go, what do you give a speech on? What are you talking about? No, I give speeches all the time. This is your opportunity to get me one-on-one. What's on your mind? What can I help you with? And they bring their documents and they bring their laptops and they show me, and I love it. It sometimes gets quite interesting. And true story is I had a Boy Scout troop come in, and one by one, because they want to talk to us elected official, I had to get a patch for the Boy Scout troop. And a young kid, little boy, sat down and he goes, "I want to talk to you about something really serious." And I said, "Certainly, tell me." And he says, "Can I talk to you about ICE?" I go, "Okay, sure." And I thought it was a family issue with ICE, interacting with his family. And he said to me, "Well, Senator, when it gets cold out, there's a patch of water that freezes over and becomes slippery. And just the color returned to my body and my face, and I breathe. And I was like, oh, that kind of ice. Sure, I'll grab my shovel and salt right now because I'd rather deal with that ice than the other ice." So it does get some lighthearted moments.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones I chuckle at. But I love my Java with Joe's. I look forward to doing more and more as we go along.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I wrote Bill Clinton, the president at the time, when I was a kid, a letter that my Super Nintendo game was way too hard.
But that's important. You see, I would have to look at it through your eyes. That game was way too hard, and I got to deal with that. That's a very important issue for you.
For any millennials out there, I think it was the Power Rangers Super Nintendo game, I think is what it was. Anyways, Senator, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And just one last question, what gives you hope in the future of bleeding disorders community? But really, it is a fractious time politically, and it does seem bleak and hard to imagine, kind of a world kind of beyond this time. So I guess what's your message of hope right now?
Yeah, Kai, I go into my senior centers. I've seen stress levels that are way too high. I go to schools and parents. I speak to everyone and I reassure them everything will be okay. We have gone through rough times before. In the 70s, I was a kid, but in the 70s, it was really rough. We have gone through rough times and we persevere. What gives me hope is hope in others. If I talk to someone and they're hopeless, that bothers me. The hope that people have in others, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, that there is some positive at the end of the tunnel. The other person's hope and confidence that things are going to get better gives me hope that, okay, we can get through this if we work together. So I have hope. When others have hope, I have confidence. When others have confidence, we feed off each other. And when they don't and they feel hopeless or they don't have the confidence, I try to instill in them, do not stress, do not worry. We will work on this. We will make sure if every elected official does their job correctly, we will make sure that everything will be okay. No matter what happens in the city or what happens in the Washington, we will make sure our state, and I'll say it as a state senator, I will make sure everything in my district is A-okay. And that's what I have to do. I have to instill faith and confidence and ultimately hope into my constituents and others that everything will be okay.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you for your time, Senator, and the partnership, showing up for our community when you can. And to everyone listening, Java Joe is obviously a real thing. Tang him up on it. And also, do you want to shout out your podcast real quick?
Yeah, listen, thanks, Guy. It's where do we go from here? And it's a great conversation, again, one-on-one that I have with individuals on any given topic. And the last question I ask my guest is, where do we go from here? You can find it on my YouTube channel, which is Senator Joe Addabbo. Just go on YouTube and type in Senator Joe Addabbo. You'll see all my little clips there. But my job is my podcast. So there, where do we go from here? I look forward to seeing anyone at my Java with Joe's, which I post on my Facebook page. But it is about reaching out. It is about, again, I encourage people, speak out, let your voice be heard, and you deservingly need to be heard. And I look forward to hearing from anyone out there that's listening to us. I'm willing to listen as well.
Well, again, thank you for your time, Senator. We really appreciate it.
Kai, thanks for the opportunity. Look forward to working with everyone. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for listening to Boundless B, the Hemophilia B podcast, the podcast standing with you from a family like yours, presented by the Coalition for Hemophilia B and in partnership with Balancing Life's Issues. Don't forget, you can stay connected to your community at hemob.org, and you can find Boundless B wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for listening to Boundless B, the Hemophilia B podcast, the podcast standing with you from a family like yours, presented by the Coalition for Hemophilia B and in partnership with Balancing Life's Issues. Produced by me, Kai. Got an idea for the show? Send us an email at podcast@hemob.org, and don't forget to stay connected to your community at hemob.org. Anything else to add, Miles?
Yeah.
This episode of Boundless B, the Hemophilia B podcast, presented by the Coalition for Hemophilia B, is made possible in part by the support of CSL. We thank CSL for their continued commitment to the bleeding disorders community.